myself out there. When I thought about social media marketing and all of the different ways to get yourself out there in an easy and quick way, I felt really uncomfortable. I did not want to do that. So I started with my network and got, had some of my initial clients that way.
Welcome back to another episode of the Personal Brand Blueprint podcast. I'm Dave Polikoff, and today we're going to have a fun conversation because it will be about personal branding growth, and in a niche that you probably haven't heard people specialize in marketing before. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. Today we have Fotine Sotiropoulos, founder of Fotine Consulting, where her clients of veterinary tech and life sciences companies are stuck in founder-led chaos. They have tons of passion, but often no real strategy. They're jumping from tactic to tactic, spending time and money without a clear plan. So she brings a strategy-first approach that cuts through the noise and helps them get clear, aligned, and focused so they can scale with intention. So get ready, take some notes, because today we are going to be chatting with Fotine about her personal brand blueprint of growing Fotine Consulting. So Fotine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Wonderful. So yeah, we're talking about veterinary tech and life sciences companies, which I think is like a niche. I have never had someone on the show that specialized in anything like that. And really you don't hear much about that kind of niche area. So I'm excited to kind of dive into your backstory, how you got into that and everything. But let's actually start there. So take us back day one. What's kind of the origin story before Fotine Consulting and everything? Like, where were you? How'd you get into kind of marketing and digital marketing of all?
Yeah, so I very early on was trying to figure out what I was doing and landed at a real estate agency where I was helping to support them. And this is early days, market the sales of houses and do different things. And then moved into financial services. And did that for a while, and moved around. I'm originally from Maine, came back to Maine from, living in Boston for about 6 years, and heard about this company called IDEXX. That's a veterinary diagnostics company. It is the largest diagnostics company in the world, and thought, oh, be kind of nice to get into that. I've done financial services, and if you can market a service, you can market anything. And managed to get in and realize that I knew nothing. It was a very early on in my career, and IDEXX really is the gold standard for marketing products and services. And I learned how to really hone my skill set and best practices that always started with the customer at the center. And what I can say about the veterinary, the veterinary space is it's not like any other. It's very, very encouraging. There's a lot of camaraderie. People want to help one another, just high energy. And honestly, they're doing really amazing things in animal health with the way that they're servicing patients and delivering patient care. Sometimes when I'm talking to veterinarians, I say to them, where are you located again? I'd like to come in for my own workup, because they're doing things in practice. They're pushing the boundaries to try to figure out how to make sure that pets are living, healthy, pain-free lives. And some of that doesn't mimic what's going on in human medicine. And I think the combination of just the type of camaraderie that's in the industry and then the things that they're doing to push the boundaries of veterinary medicine just make it really exciting space to be in.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I have a cat and he's actually fast asleep over here. And, I've obviously taken him to the vet a handful of times. And just every time I go into the vet, it's like the front desk people are just like the kindest people in the world. And then you go back and they're just, everyone's just feels so sweet and together or whatever. So yeah, I can definitely see that this is an industry where people just like, maybe it's the fact that you're not dealing with humans, that people are so are so kind. But yeah, I can definitely see that. So you got ingrained with that industry and such. And then is this like, do you have pets yourself? Like what, besides the idea of like a new challenge, was this just like a personal connection to the industry?
It was a personal connection to the industry. So I had a cat for a while. I was with my company for about 15 and a half years. I traveled a lot. I got to do a ton of different things. And I think, one of the other things that made me fall in love with it is just being able to do so many things in so many different spaces. I got to do every marketing role they had under the sun. I was tapped to go abroad and do a project. And like I said, and you felt, people are so welcoming. They just want to help. And because we had a customer centric approach, I spent a lot of time in clinics, co-developing products, co-developing, services. And when you're that close to the customer, it becomes really intoxicating, right? You're learning with them on the ground and you're speaking their language and you're building things that fit into their practice instead of thinking about something great. It's always about a great idea, right? But if it's not grounded in what the customer really needs, then it's not going to go far. And I think learning that way to be a marketer or a strategist, a marketeer, whatever you want to call yourself, is very special and very inspiring. And so I, wanted to stay with it. When I decided to go out on my own, I thought that I would expand, and I hope to expand to other, verticals into the human space. But jumping back into it, talking to customers, telling, people I used to work with what I was doing now, and having people be like, okay, I know someone, they can help you do this. Or, hey, I actually have, I know someone who's looking for services. It just happens so organically and quickly. You just get swept up in it. And so I continue to stay because I want to make a difference. I want to be part of it.
Sure. So now founder of Thravma Consulting, where was like the leap from where you were into this consulting business?
I left my comfortable, consistent corporate job for personal reasons. I wanted to focus on my family. And I had every intention of going back into a corporate environment. I spent some time with my daughter, which was hugely important to me. And the longer I stayed out of the corporate environment, the more my feelings about what was important to me and how I wanted to spend my time changed. And so I started interviewing for jobs and talking to different people. And in the meantime, I started consulting. And I had a lot of people say to me, why don't you just do that? You have great experience. You can take that, apply it. You can work on a ton of different projects. And you can manage your time. And I thought, no. I grew up in corporate. I need to go back. That's what I know. That's where I'm comfortable. I understand that. And I'm not sure that I can start my own business. I don't, who is going to want to listen to what I have to say? Imposter syndrome was real and there. And the more I started to consult and the more I started to do just even informational interviews at, corporate companies that were doing really inspiring things, the more I realized I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to build something of my own. And I did want to work on different projects and help others bring their visions to life, right? The dreams that they had, bringing those along and being part of it was really inspiring. And it just grew from there. So I consulted for about a year and a half before I decided to take the plunge and officially launch my business, right? Because when you launch your business and you say to people, I've opened an agency, this is what I'm doing, you actually have to be doing it. And I learned a lot consulting, which I'm sure you can appreciate, right? I was agreeing to all kinds of things. I was letting the clients dictate the type of work I was doing it, how I was doing it, when I was doing it. And when I figured out, yes, I want to consult, I want to do this permanently, I also realized I had to put myself in the driver's. because that was the reason I wanted to do my own thing to begin with. And the reason customers were coming to me is for my expertise. And I needed to put that in the forefront and drive with that. And when I became really clear on that, things started to change. I was much more structured about who I was, how I went to market, how I talked about the things that I was doing, and the services that I was offering. I don't know if you went through this. I'm assuming you did, where you said yes to everything. And I had, like 20 services on my website. I can do that. That became like my tagline. I can do that. But it wasn't leading me to where I wanted to be. And I wanted to be able to show up with passion and to be authentic
Authenticity.
and to do good work and to bring value to the clients. And I wanted to be able to do that both professionally and also personally in my personal life. I wanted to be able to do both and manage both. And, launching Fathoma Consulting has done that. And I'm still learning, which I'm sure you can appreciate, along the way, because I want to help people. And I think you've shared that with me. You want to help people. And sometimes you want to help them, even though it probably isn't a good idea. So I'm still figuring out, the type of clients I want to take on and the type of work I want to do. But
Yeah.
that's how
I
it
want
came
to
to be.
I want to kind of double click into the early days of making that transition, taking the full leap. Sounds like you already had some clients there. And so you had some maybe case studies, testimonials, but what were some of the early days tactics that you were taking, whether it be you were proactively trying to get clients or maybe just clients were coming to you, um, to get those first few clients? Like, let's speak to maybe the person that was you X amount of years ago who's thinking about taking that leap. What were some of the ways that you were able to get those first couple clients?
Yeah. So one of the initial ways was actually leveraging my network. Which is certainly continuing to work for me, is reaching out to people, letting them know what I was doing, and then asking them if they could introduce me to someone. So LinkedIn is amazing for that, right? So many people are connected to different people. So I was leveraging that, and that's how I got my first clients. I would reach out to people I used to work with and I'd say, "Hey, I saw you were connected to Dave. Do you think that you could introduce me? Let me tell you about what I'm doing and what I can offer." And that's how it started to happen initially. I was nervous about putting myself out there, when I thought about social media marketing and all of the different ways to get yourself out there in an easy and quick way. I felt really uncomfortable. I did not want to do that. So I started with my network and had some of my initial clients that way, started learning. But then I realized I needed to get beyond my network if I wanted to sustain, having, a stream of new clients, or even just, new conversations getting beyond people I knew. And that's when I started to focus on leveraging LinkedIn. That's where most of my clients are, to establish myself beyond the resume, right? So if you think about how a lot of people use LinkedIn today, it's just as a resume. Some of them, if they're in corporate jobs, and you just get beyond that, my expertise. And so I started to grow my LinkedIn presence, one post at a time, maybe a couple a week. And then was doing those two things, reaching out to my network and then posting on LinkedIn. And certainly that's taken on a life of its own at this point.
Hey, Blueprint fam, if you're enjoying today's episode and finding my guest insights valuable, then you'll definitely want to subscribe to the Personal Brand Blueprint podcast as we drop weekly guest interview episodes just like this one. And on that note, you obviously also see firsthand how powerful being an effective guest, like the one you're watching on this episode right now, can be at attracting qualified, interested leads directly into your sales funnel. But I know what you're thinking. You want to get into guest podcasting, but starting feels confusing and overwhelming. What equipment do you need? And how do you look and sound great? And how do you turn listeners into leads? I know this because so many of my guests had these exact problems in the past. And that is why I created the Podcast Guest Mastery Blueprint. It's a simple but powerful breakdown on everything you need to look, sound, and convert great as a podcast guest. Everything from how to set up your recording area to what equipment you need to look and sound great on camera, and what to say on podcasts to stand out, be memorable, and earn the audience's trust. And then that one key strategy to turn listeners into leads. I'm telling you, this isn't just another checklist. This is a step-by-step blueprint to make sure you look, sound, and present your best on podcasts so you can convert that attention into leads and ultimately new business. I honestly was thinking about selling this for like $97, but I'd rather give access to this guide to my personal brand blueprint podcast audience for free. So if you are ready to become a sought-after podcast guest and use it to generate leads and build your personal brand, then grab your copy of Podcast Guest Mastery Blueprint at davepoly.com/podguestblueprint. You can find the link to that in the show notes below. Again, that's davepoly.com/podguestblueprint, and start turning podcast interviews into business. Again, it's completely free for being a loyal listener, so definitely check it out. Cool? All right, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I want to get into some of that in a bit. I think it's a common story for at least what I see with like my clients as well, is that you do come from a corporate job where what I say is like you're really good at the thing you're doing within the corporate organization. And you have clients because the organization is giving you clients. There's a marketing team, there's a sales team that is closing that for you. And then they're handing it to you on a silver platter and saying, provide the service. So you're getting great experience in that sole thing. But then when you take the entrepreneurial leap, you no longer have that marketing team. You no longer have that sales team, content team to like support all of that. Now you are that person, right? I think before this podcast, we talked about the hurdles of entrepreneurship, which we'll get into, where being the solo founder is you have to do everything. And, there's tools and automations and AI and stuff we could talk about. But as a solo human founder, doing everything can be very difficult. So we find ourselves after we take that entrepreneurial leap that we look around and go, wait, where are the clients? Like they're supposed to be coming in. You realize, oh, wait, that's my responsibility now. So it's good that you, I think, initially knocked on the digital doors to like get your initial clients. And then it sounds like you made that realization quickly of like, that's only sustainable referrals. And there's only so many doors I can knock on. Let's figure out how to kind of amplify this through replicating yourself, which is content creation. So let's start talking about that leap into content creation, because you mentioned it sounded like you were a little bit fearful, maybe a little imposter syndrome of like, who wants to hear from me online and all that kind of stuff. What were some of the initial first steps that you were taking to actually produce content, and what type of content were you creating?
Yeah. So initially, I was creating things that I knew, right? Things like how to develop go-to-market strategies. And then I would break those down and give them to people. Then I started to dig into the individual pieces of those, anything from, how do you conduct customer research on a budget, right? Those were all things I sort of knew and, he had in my handbook. And then I realized I'm talking about a strategy first approach with my customers. And I talk to them about how we hear from the customers. We do a competitive deep dive. We really create a strategy based on their customers, their products, their services. And I haven't done that for myself. I know what my persona is because I know who my customers are, but I haven't written it down. And I wrote it down. I did a strategy document for myself. I did my personas, I did the competitive piece, and then I dove deeper into those personas to say, what are they thinking about? What questions are they asking? What are they going to care about when they talk to me? And what are the things that they're struggling with today? And started to build content on that. What are they struggling with today? Chaos, doing all kinds of marketing things, but nothing is sticking. So talking about the importance of focusing on the right marketing tactics, starting with the strategy first. And then I took it a step beyond that, and I started to involve others that I had worked with in the past that had deep hold in the industry around a particular, area, like scaling your business, right? You go into initial adoption and then you have to go to mass adoption. How do you do that? And how do you sustain it? And would bring in their perspective. So I write the content and then I give it to them and I say, give me your perspective, even if you disagree with me. I could be totally off on this. And started to also do that with the customers of my client, and brought in veterinarians, brought in practice managers, and started to put real world voice to it. So, my expertise is one thing, but if it doesn't have a real world voice or application to it, it can fall flat. And that's when things started to pick up for me. The first, blog I put out that had a veterinarian attached to it took off. And it was still my expertise, right? But, I was paying attention to the things that the customer were saying and starting to bring them into it. And it made, all the difference. So between the strategic, doing the strategy and figuring out the types of questions, because you take that for granted. I don't know if you experience this. You think, oh, everyone will know what I do. They'll know what a fractional CMO is. They'll know what core messaging is. They'll know why it's important to do strategy first. And the truth of the matter is we all have our expertise. So not everyone is going to know what that means. So it's about educating them, but applying it to the things that they're working on day in and day out. So it makes sense for them.
Absolutely. I think one of the difficult parts for a lot of experts in any field when they're creating content is that they don't realize that their audience isn't an expert in that field too, that they've become an expert through experience over time. And now things that used to be hard for them are just second nature and moments for them.
Right.
But their audience is at day one, so they haven't gone through that experience yet. It's not knowledge for them. So yeah, being able to like put yourself in the shoes of your ideal client of day one, which is for many coaches, consultants and such, that is them 5-10 years ago.
Right.
They were the day one ideal client. So it's like, how do you replicate your mindset back then and speak to that version of Fotine or that version of Dave who didn't know about these things yet? So I can completely see that. So this is like a really great strategy, essentially. Like you're kind of piggybacking off of others' authority as well. So, and tapping into their networks, adding in additional voices into your content, so that you're getting multiple expert opinions. What is it that you think allowed that content to do well? Were the vets and whomever that you tapped in for the content, were they also sharing the content? Were they tagged in it? Like, is it just the fact that you think there was multiple experts in the content, or was there also like a distribution play on top of that?
I think it was all of those things. The distribution play definitely helped. Some of the experts have wide networks and wide followers, much more than I have, right? Because I'm, just starting. I'm, 4 to 5 months in. And so the sharing of that, but also their perspective on the experience of working with me or their own perspective on what I bring to the table, right? So it wasn't just, you should read this. It was why you should read this, and their experience with, working that definitely helped. And that the first one I did, I was shocked at just the amount of impressions and the sharing. And it actually turned into 2 people reaching out to me to hear about my services, and we're moving, into working together, into engagement, because it had that. But it also inspired others to read the content. I'm not saying that others weren't reading my content before, but it was getting to my target audience a lot faster than it had been before. And they were digging into all the pieces and starting to learn a little bit more about what it would be like to work with me. And I'm getting that feedback. I got that feedback from a couple of clients today on calls. I feel like you're in my head and you can take my vision and you can actually bring it to life and help me get to the place that I see myself being in the future. Or, I feel like you get it. Not only do you bring that expertise to the table, but you know what my customers are facing, so you can help me go to market in a much better way, in a way where I can build credibility and trust a lot faster than I could on my own. And I think, that makes a difference. And then the second piece of it, which, content is about sharing expertise, but it's also about sharing who you are. And this was the hardest piece for me, putting myself out there in a personal and vulnerable way, um, was not a strength that I had before now. I think becoming a solopreneur has awakened that in me to share things that are happening, to share my own experiences of being a business owner, and the things that I'm facing, or just the things that are happening, in my personal life. What's my story? How did I start? And once I started to pair the expertise with the personal side of things, it changes, right? It evolved. And people are connecting with me. I'm getting messages like, we worked together for a couple of years and I feel like I know you better now than I did when we worked together. I love hearing about the things that are going on, not only in your business, but in your life, and getting to know you. And I think that's hard for people. Once you start, it becomes easier to be able to do that, and then to share what's in your head. And honestly, sometimes I share things and I think no one's going to care about this, but I'm having one of those moments where I feel like I want to put it out there. And those typically are the posts that do the best and that get the engagement, not just the comments, but people reaching out to me, texting me, messaging me on LinkedIn, and leading to conversations with potential clients.
Yeah, it's funny how we all think that the way to attract clients is I need to come across as the expert that has it all figured out. When in actuality, people want to see the scars and like want to see the hurdles that you had to go through. So at least they can relate to you a little bit more. Like, can this person relate to what I'm going through? Have they gone through the same path? And then you just kind of show the arc of like, yeah, I have. And I came out the other side using these philosophies, these frameworks, these resources I picked up along the way. And now let me kind of pass the rope or the ladder back down and I'll show you the way. And so people go, okay, I want to follow this person because it's relatable. But we don't want to show the scars sometimes because we think that it makes us look weaker. But really, it's our way for our audience to connect with us. I know I shared a post the other day about just the idea of the hurdles of solopreneurship, and you connected and said, like, I totally understand what you're going through and all this stuff. And it was a way for us to connect, beyond me being like 7 tips for XYZ and all that. Um, so that's great. And I think going back to the fact that you were so deeply involved in the veterinary space through your previous job and on site and like hearing firsthand problems and difficulties and all that, you were very much, as you said, like client first, focused. You you pulled that, right? That stuck with you, and then now you can speak their language later on. So that's why I find sometimes it's difficult for those who don't have that experience to try to get into a new space, but they don't have that experience. They can't talk the talk as well, and it's harder for them to connect with their audiences. So you were creating or are creating kind of long form textual content. Clearly, your another strategy is guest podcasting, so you're getting some video time. Also, when you mention balancing authority with storytelling, that's why I love starting these podcasts out with "Give me your origin story." That's like a key framework for me is your origin story to support your frameworks. So you're doing some video. What's kind of your goal now with where you want to take your content, and what are some other strategies that you're looking to implement?
Yeah. So I want to continue to expand the content, in the way that I'm delivering it. I've done a little bit of video, but not necessarily video with me in it. Um, and I think it lands different when it's, even if it's, 30 seconds or, a minute about a concept or something that brings it home. It lands different. So I definitely want to do more video and pair that not only with my long form, But just to make it bite sized so people are, opening things up and then guiding them to the long form to say, if you want to hear more, I have this great how-to guide that you can download on my website. But you're introducing the concept. And then I would like to do the podcast. So I can bring that expertise to life in a live virtual way, right? Where I can bring my customers on to share their stories, or experts in the industry to share, how they're helping others scale businesses. And then to also bring the customers of my clients on so they're hearing directly from them. And that I'm, more and more, ingrained in, who their customers are, what's important to them, in bringing that value to the table when they work with me.
When it comes to video content, I know, I've been, I think I'm actually celebrating probably my 1 year anniversary of this podcast. And it's very highly technical. There's some barrier to entry, but by no means is it something that should prevent anyone from taking that leap into, video content in general, whether we want to call it a podcast specifically or a YouTube video content creation that you can double as a podcast. Um, that's for some people can feel a little bit overwhelming, but what's your experience in video content? Have you done short form yet? And then this is kind of trying to grow it into long form, or like is there any nerves? Because I want to speak to those who are thinking about doing the same thing, but trying to get them kind of out of their head as to why they need to get into video and should avoid that kind of limiting mindset.
Yeah, I think, the nerves are with anything new that you do, right? It's not just video content. It was like the first time I put out my blog. I think I remember my hands might have been shaking when I hit publish, because it felt foreign to me, and the imposter syndrome was in the back of my mind. And, people say to me, like, how did you start your business? What do you need in place? And the advice I would give to anyone is, you don't need everything in place. You need to just start. You need to have a few things that customers can go to see who you are and what you do. And then you need to grow from there. And honestly, my content development has evolved just by talking more to my customers and my clients, talking to people, hearing from them what their concerns are, and, writing content from that to make sure that I'm addressing questions. And I feel the same way about video. I've been thinking way too long about it. I have people who are like, you should just do it. Pull up your phone and do it. And my inner perfectionist continues to weep because I'm making her take a back seat to some of these things, because it's honestly what stopped me from doing video. Because of that, I had the perfect setup and the microphone and this and the lighting. And, I had to be presented in a way like I was going into the office. And the truth of the matter is, you don't need any of those things. You just need to get on there and talk about what you know, or talk about things that are going to help others, and inspire wanting to connect with you. And I think another word of advice that I'm recognizing is, when I'm doing a video, I can actually take the transcript and turn it into 100 different things. So in terms of content creation, I'm trying to get faster and smarter about how I do those things. And I think video is one way you can do that, because it doesn't have to always be perfect, right? You can get on, you can talk about what you think you want to talk about, and then you can edit it, and then you can cut it in 100 different ways and turn it into long form. So it gets you to where you want to be faster.
Yeah, the power of editing is very good. And I love what you were saying about repurposing long form content, because that's obviously a core strategy of ZenPost. Is we start with YouTube videos and break that up into repurpose that into other social content. And through that, we use our workflows and automations and such to support that. But is there any current tools that you're using that have made content either faster or helped you ideate? AI tools, automation tools that have been kind of a key as a solopreneur, kind of a software employee for you?
Yeah, I think ChatGPT is the one that I call upon the most that has helped me. It's become my thought partner. So there's a lot of conversation right now about, oh, that was AI generated and that was AI written and that was, and for me, I don't think about it in that way. I still go to the table as me, I show up. But as a solopreneur, you're wearing 100 different hats and sometimes you just can't get your thoughts together. So I go in and I start writing things and I know it's not perfect and I need someone to edit it because I'm a terrible speller. So, I dump it into my chat GPT and I say, I need you to edit this. Or I dump in my personas. I have my personas in a document and I put them in and I say, I need 10 topics on the pain points for my personas because I can't think of anything to write this week. And it'll pop out a topic for me. And then, I start to write on that. So I think that especially when you're a solopreneur and you're by yourself, sometimes it becomes your partner and you dump those things. And it has helped me immensely in that way. But also creating tools after the fact, creating how-tos. I have pieces of content that are really helpful that if I dump it into a workbook that a customer can then download. And I leverage ChatGPT to help me take that content and convert it into a how-to.
Repurposing. Yeah, I love it. So you're publishing content, and I'm hearing that people are resonating with it. And is how are then what's the I guess process look like between you publishing content and you attracting new clients? Are you doing lead magnets or like funnels or anything like that, or is it mostly people just then DMing you from the content they see?
I'm doing lead magnets. I'm starting to pair a lot of my blog posts with some kind of how-to or, any different resources. And then people are DMing me, or, talking to me, or I'll write to someone and say, hey, it's been a while since we've chatted. I see you're here now. Would love to talk to you about what your company is doing. And I, I'll say, I also put out this great, how-to guide that may help you, in the meantime. So I'm starting to share it that way where I'm directly messaging, people in my network and that I know. But a lot of the new outside my network is coming, they're DMing me or they're emailing me after I post something or after someone shares something. So the sharing is definitely, a lot of people, even myself, I'm guilty of this, lurking, right? Lurking has such a negative connotation, but, reading through things and maybe liking things. But I also recognize that sharing things and making others aware of people or resources that I have access to, is helpful. So I think when people share my stuff, people are coming to, it's just getting out there and people are coming to me from that.
Yeah, that's why I love the strategy of connecting with other thought leaders and then they're sharing it, um, because that taps into their networks and it's distribution. So I think one thing for the audience is the idea of if you're going to invest into long form pieces of content, you can't think about just posting and ghosting. You got to think about the idea of what's the longevity, what's the life cycle of that piece of content. And yes, that takes the form of repurposing content, translate that, chop that up into other forms of social post. But also, how can you like force the distribution of that through what Fotine's saying in terms of like, if you're DMing people and you're understanding you have a CRM of potential prospects or leads, and you're pinpointing what their needs are through the conversation, and they might say like, yeah, I'm really struggling with content ideation. And I start creating content, I create a YouTube video around how to come up with topics for your post. I'm going to go back to that person and go, hey, I know that you said you were struggling with this. Check out this new YouTube video. And then now they're just, that's time on content. That's your digital replica selling for you while you sleep. So yeah, all of that, the ecosystem that you're building is really great. Well, this is great. What's kind of like one key piece of advice that you would give our audience in terms of them trying to build their own personal brand? What's one area that you would say, hey, focus on this and ignore this shiny object over here?
I would say, don't skip on the strategy. It doesn't need to be, cumbersome, but it gives you some direction. And then, kick perfection to the door and just show up. Show up and try. And, I put things out there, or I try things that don't work and I don't feel bad about it. When I first started putting out content and it flopped, I felt really bad about it. Now I don't. Now I take that as a learning and I move on, to the next thing. And I am making sure that I'm constantly evolving. And that's what I would say about your personal brand. You don't set it and forget it, right? You don't go out there and say, this is who I am, and then you leave that. It is constantly evolving, especially in the virtual world that we live in now. Everything happens online. So you're going to evolve. You're going to learn from your customers, from your clients. You're going to learn from other experts, and continue to be open to that and evolve and feel great about it.
Love it. Well, Fotine, this has been awesome. If people want to connect with you, learn a bit more about your business, where should they go?
They should go to my website, thavmaconsulting.com. They can hear about me, contact me from there, and then also access all my great resources.
Yeah, there it is. Content creation, content marketing. Go check it out. Well, Fotine, thank you so much for being on this episode of Personal Brand Blueprint. We'll be back next week. See ya.
Thank you.
And we're out.